Introducing my new crochet pattern, the Everchange Sweater. The Everchange Sweater is a crochet V-neck raglan sweater constructed top-down in the round with feature slip-stitch embroidery on the sleeves. It's an ever-changing blank canvas for you to play with. The pattern is written for 9 women's sizes, extra small through to 5XL, and you can download the pattern right now from my Pepper Goose Design pattern stores on both Ravelry and Etsy. For those that want to give it a go but prefer a little bit of help, I will be running a make-along starting December 10th, running for 7 weeks through to January 28th. It will be hosted in my pattern support group, which is called Pepper Gaggle, and all other make-along details can be found on my website. This video is to give an overview of how the sweater is constructed and help you plan colour placement for your project, as there are a few different options. The Everchange pattern is written using the Shapiers products listed here to combine gradient yarn A with solid colour yarn B, and everything except a few rounds of neckline edging is worked with a 3mm hook. The Everchange sweater is worked top down starting from the back neck, and we work in open rows until we reach the bottom of the V-neck, which is the V-point. Then we work in closed rounds down to the underarm and continue in rounds to complete the rest of the bodice and hemline ribbing. The sleeves are also added top down. Working them in open rows makes the next job of slip stitch embroidery much easier, and then you sew the sleeve closed before adding the cuff ribbing. But if you don't want the embroidery on your sweater, then you have the option to work the whole sleeve as closed rounds instead. The contrast neckline stitching is worked last. This top-down method allows you to try it on as you go, and for this design, the main fabric characteristics don't change significantly during blocking, only a centimetre or 2 longer maybe, so trying it on as you go is a good indicator of final fit. Let's look at colour planning as written in the pattern document, which combines gradient yarn A for the bodice and upper sleeves with the solid colour yarn B for the lower sleeves. My example is for a size medium. Here is the yardage required for each size, including yarn for 2 swatches using yarn B. The sweater is not crop exactly, but it's designed as a short sweater to wear at high hip, so it could be worn over a dress or a skirt. If you prefer a longer sweater to sit at low hip, then you'll need more yarn, and guidance for how much is provided in the pattern. Sizes L and 3XL are borderline sizes based on matching gauge consistently and the guaranteed minimum of 215 grams per yarn A cake, because they vary from 215 to 225. It's always recommended to have contingency yarn, and this is packaged into all my calculations as the recommended amount of yarn, so you aren't in danger of running out. It's the contingency yarn, though, that tips the 3XL into the vague possibility of a 4th cake, but the large is really expected to use almost all of the 2 yarn A cakes and is really quite likely to nudge into the 3rd. Unless you're making a size large that is significantly shorter or reducing the stitch count a lot for the hemline ribbing, then with variability in personal gauge alone, it's game on for Yarn Chicken. My recommendation, therefore, is to order the extra yarn cake for these sizes to ensure you have the contingency. If you end up with a spare whirl cake or most of one, I dare say you're going to find a use for it because it's such a popular yarn with lots of patterns for it. I mention this here and in the pattern document, so you can make that finance versus chicken decision for yourself though. Now, there's an extra little mark there for size XL. This is a special case, and 2 or 3 cakes are noted for XL because if your colour of B yarn exactly matches the outside colour of your yarn A cakes, you could use the yarn B leftovers in place of A3 just for this size. Now, working through the medium example, we work top down using A1 from inside to outside, starting at the back neck and work in rows until we reach the V-point. Some yarn from the centre of yarn cake A1 is now used up. We want to remove the same amount of yarn from the centre of A2 so that A1 and A2 are at the same colour point. Then continue working top down, now in closed rounds, alternating A1 and A2 to maintain the gradient until we reach the underarm. We now have more yarn removed from the centre of each yarn cake A and A2. How much yarn used from each cake here for each of the 9 sizes is important, as it determines the colour of the gradient at the junction with the future lower sleeve, and guidance for this is provided in Pattern Appendix A. The future sleeve embroidery is worked over the colour junction and visually balances the sweater design. And the lower bodice is where things get tricky. For sizes extra small, small, medium, and just scraping in for size L if your gauge is perfect, there's enough yarn remaining on the outer colours of A1 and A2 to complete the lower bodice and hemline rib for the length specified by the pattern. Now we need to talk about what happens for other sizes, or maybe the large, when A1 and A2 run out. Because we're now at the outer colours of the yarn cakes, we finish the remaining lower bodice and hemline rib working outside to inside with A3 for sizes, well, large if we include that one, up to 3XL, or we can alternate A3 and A4 for size 3XL depending on preference and what you've ordered, but definitely sizes 4XL and 5XL need to alternate A3 and A4 to complete the remainder of the lower bodice and hemline rib. For sizes XL and above, this will create a stripe effect as the colour is worked in the opposite direction towards the hemline rib, meaning it won't look like the sort of full gradient range you see here for the medium, where A1 and A2 were almost used, and size L is likely to use a small amount of A3, so it will still be at the same colour point anyway and not emerge as a new stripe yet. The lower sleeves are added using yarn B, which is the solid colour, and are easy to shorten or lengthen if required. The central part of A2 that you removed earlier can be used to work the slip stitch embroidery on the sleeves. Use the outer colour for the background embroidery and the inner colour for the foreground strip of embroidery that extends to the shoulder. Then sew the sleeves closed and resume using yarn B to add the cuff ribbing. The last step is edging the neckline. The first 4 rounds use the inner part of the A2 that you removed earlier, so the colour blends in with most of the neckline fabric. The remaining rounds for the neck edging use your preferred colour, whatever you like, from any of your yarn A leftovers. So let's move on to option 1. Colour planning variation 1 uses only gradient yarn A for a full gradient or full ombre effect over the sweater. This sample was made using Shapey's Whirl in Forbidden Fuchsia 555, working outside to inside, so the ombre gradient would work light to dark down the sweater as you went. And you can see the yardage for this option here on the right, again showing the borderline sizes that are best to have the extra yarn cake to allow for contingency. So how do we create this version? Sizes extra small, small and medium can use a similar approach as before, that is, A1 to V point, find matching colour point of A2, then alternate A1 and 2 from the V point to the underarm. From here, save the remainder of yarn cakes A1 and A2 for the sleeves, pot them aside, and add the lower bodice with A3 from the same colour point, and A3 will run out partway through the hemline rib. Once this happens, go back and work the sleeves with the A1 and A2 you put aside. 1 cake is used for each sleeve, embroidery and cuff. Then use the sleeve leftovers to complete the hemline rib, working the colour gradient in the opposite direction. You can see some of the lighter pink creep in at the lower edge of my hemline rib, as medium is the largest of all sizes that you can get away with this and it still blend in. Choose a preferred colour from leftovers to edge the neckline. All sizes larger than a medium, though, will need to cut the fuzzbuzz joins from their yarn cakes to plan out the full gradient over the entire sweater. And doing it this way for the medium will provide more leeway to some extent to allow for some variance in finish size or add some length for the same number of yarn cakes, as there is less yarn wastage. The last official colour planning option is to make the Everchange sweater in one solid colour, meaning all in Whirlette or Woolly Whirlette. Now that we've covered the construction and the colour planning involved for other options, you can see that this is definitely the easiest way to go. Here is the expected yardage before and after 15% contingency. Because these balls are only 100 grams each, the contingency yarn bumps it up by 1 ball for most sizes. Now please note that there are no affiliate links in the documents or support blogs. I simply recommend the extra yarn for your best making experience, and by default, designers package a contingency amount into their recommended yardage. I would normally have just listed the upper amount for each size, but I wanted to highlight borderline size when it comes to the more expensive yarn A cakes, and I thought I should describe yardage in a consistent way for all official colour planning variations. You may have realised by now, though, that there are infinite colour planning possibilities. I can't provide yardage advice for each one, or we'd all go quite mad. I have included an extra useful resource, though. Yardage estimates for each part of the garment without contingency is in a table on page 4 of Appendix A to help guide colour placement for your project, particularly the full ombre version, and it will also enable you to figure out a plan of attack if you decide you want to do something completely different. The Everchange sweater is a blank canvas, really, which allows you to make a wardrobe staple solid colour sweater or a statement rainbow of layered colour and embroidery. Grab the pattern now from Ravelry or Etsy and follow the links to my website for all make-along details.